the liaison with our budget, and we will have further discussions on that. But I simply just wanted to reiterate that we will make no decisions in the public safety building without getting input from our citizens and being totally transparent. So just wanted to make that, and with that, Councilman Swanson, would you lead us in an invocation and a pledge of allegiance? Maybe we lost Councilman Swanson.
From my vantage point, it said that he left the meeting, Mayor.
Well, I can understand somebody leaving the meeting when they're asked to say an invocation and pledge of allegiance. So with that, Commissioner Thomas, could we call on you to lead us in an invocation and the pledge of allegiance, please?
Sure. Our Father in heaven, we gather tonight as citizens of North Ogden. We are thankful for this opportunity we have to gather and voice our opinions and concerns about the ongoings of our great city. We ask that we'll be able to think clearly and express our thoughts, both the members of this commission and council, and as well as the public, that we'll be able to speak clearly and voice our concerns and our desires to help guide this great city to a better future. We ask that that would bless those in need at this time due to this virus, that they'll be able to make a recovery, and we'll be able to also play our role and our part in helping the community grow stronger through this service. And we ask for these things in guidance in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Those of you who have a flag nearby, would you please rise, and we'll have Commissioner Thomas lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate that. Just prior to moving into the consent agenda, I would just like to give those who have joined us a brief update on the city and its preparedness and what we're doing in regards to dealing with this coronavirus. Many of you probably know we do have citizens in our community that have been tested positive for the virus. I would encourage all of us to follow the directive of our governor and our county commissioners to stay home and stay safe. The city has a good plan. We have instigated social distancing, which is being followed very closely by all of our staff. Many of you know that the city offices, walk-in traffic has been closed for some period of time. And recently we closed walk-in traffic to the police department based upon Chief Quinney's request and what we saw happening there. Our Public Works has got a Team A and a Team B, where those are separated in case one team is exposed to the virus, that we can continue to function properly. Chief Quinney has done a great job with the police department in making sure that we have properly scheduled those. Our officers are fine. We are not aware of any positive tests with any of our public safety individuals. And I just want to let the citizens know that things in the city are well planned out, and we feel like we are in a good position to deal with the virus and support our citizens. So with that, let's move on to the consent agenda. I'd be looking for a discussion or any action to consider the February 11th, 2020 City Council meetings. So are there any comments? And if not, I'd be looking for a motion to approve those minutes?
Mayor, I'll move that we approve the consent agenda with the minutes.
We have a motion by Councilman Swanson to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Okay, who seconded that so we can make sure we have that in the minutes?
I think I heard
Blake did.
I'm going to go with Councilwoman Ekstrom on that. Councilman
Great
Swanson.
idea.
All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Or any opposed? Okay, with the approval of the minutes, we'd like to enter into our joint work session and open it up for any public comments. Asking that those be limited to the time frame. And we'll delay for a minute to make sure that we can receive from John any comments from the public.
My apologies, missing the pledge and the prayer. I lost my internet.
That's no problem. Commissioner Thomas took your place and said he'd bill you later.
Okay.
John, do we have any comments from the public? John? It looks like John's still online with us. John, can you hear us?
John is calling in separately on a phone, I think. He's actually dialing in. His computer connection doesn't have a microphone. So I think maybe, Mayor, you might suggest that if anybody would like to comment, they can, I don't know, can they get on the chat? I don't know if they can.
Well, John
submit
has been
questions.
controlling that, so I don't know if he has things muted so that the public can't comment.
I've been watching the chat. I don't see any comments on the chat. If you guys would like me to watch that for a minute until John joins, I'm happy to do that.
Would you please do that, Brandon?
Sure thing.
So at this point in time, we know of no public comments, so we'll move to our agenda. Hopefully we have our planning director, Rob Scott, with us, who will give a department annual report. Rob, are you with us?
Mayor, can I make one more comment? We said that on the outset of the meeting, as we had some technical difficulties, that we'd reference people who may be joined on YouTube to refresh the page on the city website so they can rejoin this chat if they want to comment. Do you remember that?
Okay, those of you who are on YouTube, we'll wait a minute to give you a chance to refresh the website in case you have comments.
Mayor, I'm back. Sorry, my cell phone disconnected, so I'm on a landline now.
I
Okay,
just got a text message from Brandon Bell. He's saying on Zoom, the chat is showing is currently disabled.
John, can you enable chat?
That's my fault. Yeah. I was sorry, it's because I was trying to call back in.
Okay, so we'll let people try to access chat for a few minutes based upon the fact it was disengaged. John, is Rob planning on joining us tonight?
Rob just called me and he is joined to the meeting, but we can't see him. I wonder if he needs elevated permissions, John.
I can. I've been waiting to promote him till it's his turn to talk,
I
just
see.
because it's easier to not have 80 people on video.
It is his time, John.
Okay.
Brandon, you seeing anything on chat?
Nothing there. Oh, here comes something right now. It was a test of the chat from Tiffany Staley, who is a employee. She wanted to say thanks for what we're trying to do, and she's testing the chat, and it was successful. So she's coming in as a member of the public and testing that for us. So
Good. Okay, we'll wait just a moment to see if we get any further chats. For anybody that's connected otherwise. There being no, let's see, Julie Anderson has joined, it looks like. She's tested chat.
Okay, Mayor, this is Rob Scott. Can you hear me?
We can, Rob. We're just looking to see just a half second to see if we have any further communication via chat. It looks like it is working, and we have several citizens who have verified that. So are there any further or any public comments at this point in time? If not, we will move on to the Planning Department Annual Report. The presenter will be Rob Scott, our Planning Director. So Rob.
Thanks, Mayor, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you. We have put together a report highlighting the activities and accomplishments of the department for the year. I'm not going to belabor what's already there for you to peruse, but would invite you, any of you, that if you have questions or would like to make any reflections on what took place as part of the department activities, feel free to get in touch with me.
All right, Rob, could we open it up to any questions from the council? You very nice job in your write-up. Thank you very much. But any questions from council members? Looks like you're off the hook.
Blake,
Blake, you got a
I was
question?
just gonna say, no questions from me.
All right, thank you. Rob, while you're on with us, then we would like an update on a discussion on our land use development code process and our key public decisions format.
Thank you. I've sent you out a staff report regarding the land development code, the process and so forth. And so I've given you a lot to chew on this evening. So let me, as part of the staff report, John, are we able to tie in with Jennifer and John and Meg Ryan?
Do you want them all able to speak right now together? Is that what you want?
Well, I'm hoping they're able to at least listen in.
So they are listening in as participants.
Okay, so we have our consultants from Logan Simpson, Jennifer Gardner, and John Jansen, and also Meg Ryan, who are a part of their team that have been selected to guide the land development code rewrite for us in the city. So just a few brief comments before we get into the meat of this discussion, which is the last time that our zoning and subdivision ordinance were updated was clear back in 2002. And as you can well imagine, there's been an amazing number of things that have changed in that in the interim. So we've had more specifically the update of our general plan. Since that time, there's been many procedural changes, a lot of organizational changes. We've had lots of changes in our policymakers, both on the Planning Commission and the City Council. Been a lot of changes with staff. And in fact, our state code has been changed since 2002. The Land Use Development and Management Act, and it continues to be changed over time as the state legislature sees fit and what have you. So let me, John, if we could just go to the, let's see, page 2, and just highlighting the conformance with the general plan. I wanted to make just a brief comment about that. If you had an opportunity to take a look at this, so often people misunderstand the relationship of the general plan to overall city government. And they often think that the general plan only deals with land use issues, which it does not. It truly is a general plan. It identifies and works with all of our various city facilities and our city functions within the opportunity to see that general plan move forward. So a key component of that is that codes reflect a desire for the future of North Ogden, but that's not the only thing that is able to be identified as actually implementing the plan. So there's lots of other things that you all do, especially as part of the budget priorities that you make. So the foundation of the Land Development Code's foundation is the vision, goals, policies, and strategies found in that general plan. And I've given you just an excerpt from the plan that relates to the overall vision. So you can see the breadth of our general plan as it talks about maintaining the beauty and the relationship of the community to the physical environment, but also to the environment of the individuals that work and live within the community. It talks about things like unique downtown components of housing variety, visual quality, our street network, our recreation and parks network, proximity to the mountains, et cetera, and the sustainability of our tax base. And in terms of the last one is preserve the essential characteristics of a family-friendly community that assures an enduring legacy, small town feel, and high quality of life in North Ogden. One of the key strategies is found in the housing goals. Proactively evaluate current ordinances and policies to determine whether there are obstacles that can be removed or modified to achieve the community's housing goals. And I would dare say all of the goals within the community itself. So let me just, by way of introduction again, the purpose of this discussion tonight is to consult with both the commission and the council regarding a list of code policy issues and gain consensus prior to giving direction on the project. One of the things that your staff has done has spent literally a couple months going through the entire set of codes. And we've identified conflicting provisions and potential revisions so that the consultants wouldn't have to do that. So we have identified a document that incorporates those things. An awful lot of what is needing to be done is just do a substantial update, including the processes within the code. An example of that is our subdivision process is not consistent with what we do with respect to subdivision approvals. In addition to that, what we've done is found that there are multiple standards for our zoning ordinance that are scattered throughout the code. An example of that are landscaping standards. They're in multiple chapters and relate to various specific application types. That's one of the things that you've seen in our outline is that we're interested is reformatting to make sure that that occurs. So we'd like to keep this in mind as well. The budget for this project, it does not allow for the complete rewrite of the ordinance. There are some provisions that I've shared with you that are add-ons that are potential projects that staff feels needs to be done, but we're going to need to prioritize those in order to be able to keep the project moving. City staff is committed to writing a number of those chapters, including a sensitive lands chapter, creating a city zone, a civic zone for city-owned properties, and also an infill ordinance. So now maybe we could, John, go to the outline. And we're down to state law changes in general philosophy. So what is before you on the right-hand column of this table is, you're all familiar with the difference between administrative and legislative decisions. Administrative decisions are those things that are like subdivisions and site plans. They're typically handled by either the planning commission or staff. They're important because those standards, if they are met, we are bound to be able to approve them. Legislative matters, typically city council, you're the ones that are the final decision makers with legislative matters. So that's the adoption of the general plan, changes in our text, map amendments to our zoning, all of those kinds of things you're very used to seeing. Not very often do you get involved with looking at administrative matters, which again, the planning commission and staff are the ones that generally handle those. So we've identified in working with our consultants some basic principles. One of the things when we write code is that there's a legal standard. It's called write things that are clear and objective. So the idea is that the people, when they read the code, they can understand it. That's as far as the term clear. Objective really means, are the standards, what's the purpose of those standards? Are they objective in the sense that they're accomplishing a community objective? And are they furthering the direction for the city relative to our general plan? So some other principles associated with that are providing some procedural flexibility, so that as we have applications, as we have our processes for being able to have individuals go through an approval process, are these procedures in such a way that they are not only helpful to applicants, but they're helpful to the staff in being able to process these things in a timely way and in a professional manner. The next one is designate who does what. So typically we have the staff that handles certain things. We have planning commission, and then we also have the city council. All three bodies, if you will, have specific land use authority. And some of those things are either out of date or unclear at this time. And so that's one of the things we're going to be talking about here in just a minute. The next one is less discretion. The state code has been changed with respect to conditional uses. And conditional uses really have become more of a name with a site plan review. So basically, conditional uses are required to be approved if it's shown that the application can meet the standards. Very infrequently are they ever, they might be modified, but not denied. Again, tied to that are the standards imposed must be written in the code. And so in the past, one of the ways that, because it is difficult in some ways to write specific conditions for every specific type of use, then the catch-all was to make it a conditional use and then consider the unique characteristics of that particular project and then cover it as part of a conditional use. So one of the things that we'll be talking some more about is the relationship between those two processes. And lastly, variances will be rare. If we have effective codes and what have you, if there are instances where there needs to be some sort of a relief valve or what have you, they are spelled out in state code, and it's very difficult for those to actually be approved very often. In fact, we only see usually a handful of variance applications every year. I think this last year we only had like 2 or 3. So the next portion of the format is more of a summary of what we've done to date. One is we formatted the format of the amendment. So we've given some direction as far as making sure that the format of the code is all the same. Terminology, titles, capitalization, et cetera, you can read that. The next one is we have another thing that we have in our code is we have definitions scattered throughout the whole ordinance and through various chapters. One of the things that we want to do is bring all of the definitions into one chapter so that you can find them. And then organizing the code, put similar provisions together, various processes, zones, and special regulations. So we've given you, one of the attachments we've given you is the proposed table of contents for the land development code. Again, what it does is it brings together the subdivision ordinance and it brings together the zoning ordinance together into one code. And as such, we feel like that's going to definitely be a real step forward. I know that's a very long introduction, and I apologize for that. Let's get down to the actual discussion, which includes the following. Go to the bottom of that, go up a little bit. Right there where it says Land Development Code Policy Amendments and Topics. So one of the first ones is Land Use Authority Identification. I think that we've got a pretty good feel for who's responsible for what. It's just that in the code, it specifies things that we no longer do and haven't done for many, many years. For example, there's a role of the city council as part of the administrative review process for subdivisions. I mean, that has not had, we just haven't done that in a long, long time. So that needs to be modified. The next one is that we have, you'll see in the second bullet point, where it says subdivisions. It has minor and regular subdivisions. This again is one where the process works pretty well. It's just that it just needs to be updated. For example, small subdivisions, we have, for some strange reason, we have this code that talks about 5-lot subdivisions and 10-lot subdivisions. There really is very little difference between the two, and our recommendation is just have one that goes to 10 lots. The next one is subdivision standards update. An example of that is the need for some standards relating to connectivity. We have some standards that talk about when a subdivision goes in, they need to provide access to adjoining properties so they're not cut off. But there are some need for some standards there. Again, subdivision process, the next one, land use authority options. We can simply update the current process to reflect what we're doing now. Another thought is that, and this is not just an idea from our own ideas, but other people, sometimes what's done in other cities is that the preliminary approval for subdivisions is granted by the Planning Commission, and the final approval is done by the staff. Similar to the process that we use for the approval of minor subdivisions. And the reason for that thought is that the only difference between a preliminary and final is that the final requires that all of the engineered documents are put in place and are approved by our city engineer pretty much. The Planning Commission can weigh in on that one as well. So we've kind of talked about subdivisions. Maybe I could just open it up to questions on subdivisions before we go talk about site plans and conditional uses. Hopefully I haven't put you all to sleep.
So Rob, I had a couple of questions. One was that you said the standards are not consistent with subdivision approval. So do we just need to update the standards? Are we approving things that we oughtn't? What's that?
So it's a combination of process and standards. So the process side of it is the description that I shared with respect to the Planning Commission is the land use authority for subdivisions. However, in the code, it actually says the city council is to approve some subdivisions. And like I say, we have not done that never since I've been here. It's been about 7 years. So it just makes sense that the processes be updated to reflect what is, and I can vouch for this, I think a really good process that we have.
Okay, perfect. Then we have, we like to have consistency. Consistency is good. All right, and then my
Consistency is
other
a
question
great
was-
thing.
It really is. Oh,
So
goodness.
in terms of some of the subdivisions, some of the subdivision standards and what have you, some of those are can be a bit of a problem because we have conflicting provisions, and we would like to eliminate those conflicts and make them more consistent. You've been seeing the last little while, the last couple of years, our city engineer, Lauren Gardner, has done a tremendous amount of work on putting together our public works standards. And one of the things we're starting to do, instead of repeating those standards in the zoning ordinance or the subdivision ordinance, is just reference that document so that we don't have duplicative standards. And when something changes, then all of a sudden you've got two documents that you have to worry about to try to bring them up to speed.
Oh, it helps to have records linked for sure. Okay, fantastic. Then my other one was subdivision connectivity. I didn't realize we tried to do that. I mean, I've seen it happen because I know the subdivision, the Coldwater subdivision I lived on, 2500, now connects to what used to be Lola Woodfield's Orchard, where the mayor lives, is connected together. Is that a plan that we're trying to actually connect them together so that our roadways, people can get where they're going without having to go out onto the main roadways? Is that kind of the
Yeah, Charlotte,
Mhm.
just recently on the subdivision, the Pheasant View that was brought forward by Johnny Hanson, that's an issue that I think still is unresolved. There was no connection on the initial plot presented that connected it to the adjoining land. I think originally, Rob, you'd had kind of a road heading to the west out of that subdivision. So that was a recent issue that Rob brought up and something we've dealt with, because if you look at that, it just comes from Alberta Drive down to
At a
Lowman
Lowman View.
Lowman View, but there's no connection to either property on the east or the west. So that's something that is, I'm sure, going to come up from Rob that gives an example of a recent subdivision we've talked about.
Okay.
That's a great example, Mayor. Just to give you a practical example, if you were to look at Central City Ogden, those blocks are 10-acre blocks. So they're 660 feet in length. And our block length standards allow some blocks to be up double that. And that's another one that I really think needs to have a hard look at to make sure that we have that effective connectivity so that neighbors don't have to go be acquainted with one another. They don't have to drive clear around, get in a car. They can just walk over and say hello to their neighbor. So that's a really important one.
I'm all about connection. I love it. Yeah. I like, especially when you bring up that we want neighbors to be able to walk towards each other and not have to get in the car and drive all the way around. I really like that. That sounds like a great idea.
Okay, any other comments? So before we move on? Okay, Rob,
So again,
why don't you continue
Mayor, this isn't necessarily an end-all meeting. If you or any of the council members or planning commission will be discussing this multiple times, but we just want to make sure that you're aware of the direction that we're moving towards. And if you have some suggestions or other things that you'd like us to address, that's part of this discussion tonight. So are we ready to move on and talk about site plan review and conditional use permits? Okay, so I shared a little bit about how conditional use permits are, I'll use a term maybe John Jansen wouldn't agree with this, but they're sort of glorified site plan reviews is what they are. And we have specific standards for conditional use permits that are somewhat general in nature. But frankly, our new site plan review chapter that we just adopted has many of those same type of things that people need to address as part of their site plans. So this is the challenge for the possibility of eliminating conditional use permits altogether, is that sometimes it's very difficult to address every specific standard for every use that's in the code. And it's not that every code is going to need those, but certain types of uses have unique characteristics. I'll give you an example. One of those is the review of daycare centers. Those are certainly we have a good set of standards that's in those, but do you write those for every use that's in the code? Pretty tough to do that. So we'd like to take a shot at eliminating conditional use permits, but we may have to back off of that one. Any thoughts on those two? If not, we can move to the next page, John. So as I mentioned, there are some potential
Hey, Rob.
add-ons to our land development code project.
Rob, we have a question, I think, from Commissioner
Rob,
Thomas.
sorry, I
Oh,
couldn't get my
please.
thing. I couldn't get my mic unmuted. The only thing I would say on conditional use is there's some uses that you think of that you don't want to just blanketly announce are permitted. I think by leaving a conditional use, at least it does something mental that an applicant is thinking that they're going to have to go through a deeper dive process for an approval, which might help us limit some types of uses or maybe the process, just what it does mentally. I know really it's just a glorified permitted use with a longer process, but I do like that side of the conditional use, having it in the code. I like because it just says, hey, we'll allow this, but we don't really want it, so we're going to try and really make you do it our way. And so that some of those uses that we may not want to have that way, that gives us that guidance, at least to the people that might be applying. So I like it for that reason, just what it does mentally to people. If you're saying, well, not come one, come all, it's like, well, we'll let you, but you're going to have some conditions. Being that, obviously going through the process, some of those conditions, all it is has to comply with, what's required in any other use, but mentally at least tells people, hey, we're not a super big fan of this type of use. So that's all I would say about conditional use for that.
And I don't disagree with your comment. As part of our review of all of the uses within the commercial zones, that's going to be a discussion as to whether, of course, they're either not permitted, or if they potentially warrant to have a conditional use designation. So that'll be part of that project. Any other comments about site plan and conditional uses? Okay, let's move on to the top of page 2. And here we've identified a couple of possible add-ons relative to the land development code. And the first one deals with our residential zones. We currently do not have a cluster subdivision provision. We do have a PRUD provision. We have a group dwelling provision, and we have multifamily zones. So we have R3 and R4 zones. So what we're hoping to do through this is to, again, simplify not only processes, but combine the standards for review for these types of projects. So let me just describe what a cluster subdivision is. We have situations where we have in our city, we have a number of locations where there are hillside areas, And as a part of those hillside reviews and that, in some instances, it makes sense to preserve the steeper lands and maybe transfer some of that density into a cluster of smaller sized lots and maybe combine building, little different building types, so that the land can be effectively used, but also preserve some of the that land as far as the steepness. The other some cities use that provision also when it comes to, we've talked in our general plan about preserving ag land and what have you. That's another possibility with transfer development rights and those types of things. So another option for that. So we would suggest that the cluster subdivision ordinance is one that not necessarily it's guaranteed that it's an add-on, but at least ought to be considered. The next one is the PRED and group dwelling, their chapters. The difference between a PRUD and a group dwelling is basically the size of the project, the land area. So you have PRUDs are 5 acres and above. Small group dwellings are 1 acre, and then it goes up to 5 acres. And these two ordinances are, I just say, woefully out of date. I'll give you an example. One is that the density for these types of projects is actually found in the group dwelling chapter, and it really isn't. We use that density, but it really belongs in the PRUD chapter as well. In fact, the two ordinances should be one ordinance, in my opinion. And then the last one is mesh with multifamily zones. So we have R2, R3, and R4 zones and what have you. We really need to think about how those, not only the location of those zones, where it's appropriate to place them within the city, but the relationship between those zones and the PRUD and group dwelling. And we've actually, I didn't include the MPC zone, but the MPC zone actually allows more density than any of those, and rightfully so, but it probably ought to be included in that mix as well. So let me just throw that out and see, get a reaction from all of you.
I'm surely not adverse to taking a look at it, Rob, and see how it fits in with our general plan going forward. So I think at this point in time, we'd be open to looking at suggestions. So I don't have any problem with it. Don't know about the rest of the council. Any comments from council?
Yeah, if we could.
Councilwoman Ekstrom?
Yes, if you could plot out what that would look like. I mean, if you're going to kind of meld zones together, if you could like draw one out, what would we see when it was put together? Or is it just putting the standards all in one spot? Is that kind of what you're saying? I want to make sure I'm clear.
Well, we'd have to work with our consultants to come up with the actual formatting of it. But in my estimation, what we should be doing is basically having one chapter that includes those options as far as the group dwelling in the PRUD ordinance. And it also should relate directly to the R2, R3, and R4 zones as to how those mesh together. Because frankly, they really don't do a good job today.
Okay. And that might be one of those things about connectivity too. We want to make sure that things are connected and we don't just isolate neighborhoods, even if they are a different zone, right? Is that kind of what we're looking at also? And then also, and putting all of the standards in one place?
Yes, it's putting all the standards in one place. And we do have standards that talk about the relationship between more intense zones and less intense zones. So the multifamily zones, if they happen to abut a single family zone or even commercial zones, do the same thing. We have some buffering standards, but it would be definitely appropriate to reinforce those.
Okay.
I'm very interested in seeing the council's gut feel reactions to the clustering notion. The idea there being that increasing density preserves open space, right? Which is sort of counterintuitive because we think, oh, the larger lots and things like that obviously creates a more open feel as you go through them, right? And that's the traditional thinking. I think the thought here is that as we cluster and put those housing units closer and closer together, the same number of housing units on a large area, that we're actually preserving open space. I just really like to know the council's thoughts on that. It may not be your final thoughts, but some of your initial thoughts, because that's an interesting notion to me for that purpose.
Do I just blur? I don't know, Mayor Berube, how do we want to, do you want to still recognize us? I'm not sure exactly how it, should I raise my hand in the chat or, but I have some thoughts on it if you want to recognize me.
Yes, we will recognize you and hear your thoughts.
I'm fine to proceed however we want, Mayor, but in the past, our work sessions have been rather informal. We've sat around a table and discussed things. And I don't know if you want to proceed that way where you're just open to comments here, or if you want to.
It's like I say, Brandon, times aren't normal. Nothing's normal now. So go ahead, Charlotte.
Okay. Well, thank you. I like the idea. I see trends of not having so much land around us and having more open space for people to congregate together. So to me, it just kind of, it feels good. I kind of like that idea, especially as someone who doesn't particularly love yard work. I like to go across the street to the park better. I don't know what other people feel, or I mean, that's a very personal opinion, but I kind of lean toward it. It's, you know, clustering together, having people closer together in their living area, but then having space where they can go out and recreate and meet together and do other kind of gatherings in more open spaces, kind of more parks. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I had a question.
Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
Phil here. I have 2 thoughts. One, I agree with Councilwoman Ekstrom. My caution, my hesitation is an instance where somebody has a large plot of land and some of it is unbuildable. And they wouldn't be able to build anything on this so-called open land anyway, and they want to transfer higher density into other areas where they can build. I think that's a different circumstance than clustering density to preserve open space that otherwise would have been built on.
So more of a usable open space. Okay, yeah, I like that.
I have a question. If you're going to cluster homes and the land out around those homes are left open, is that going to be owned by the city? Is that going to have to be maintained by the developer? How's that going to be managed?
So we have, in my experience, cities treat that in various ways. People can put things in conservation easements. They can include it within the specific lots of the project that's there, or they can actually turn it over to the city itself. It's each unique circumstance needs to be able to be considered that way. And Councilmember Swanson's comment, we already have provisions in our ordinance that say that you cannot include properties that are over a certain percentage in the density calculation for projects. So we would certainly not go against that.
Okay.
Other comments?
So regarding connectivity, as I've heard that brought up a few times as well, I support that as well as a planning commission member and a resident. Although by a lot of what we've heard on the planning commission, as new developments, especially that are in different zones, but existing developments, by and large, the people in the existing developments that have shown up to the meetings have not wanted that connectivity. I believe they view it as a us versus them kind of mentality. I'm still in favor of them, and I believe having those ordinances in the, drafted and that we have to enforce now will help us enforce those when those tough conversations come. But having been on the planning commission for a few years, you can take Village of Prominence Point as an example. We tried to have a road actually connect to an existing subdivision and a pathway, and the people on the other side of that fence really did not want connectivity. It was difficult to try to express to them that one day they're going to be friends and neighbors, because we're all just people, and they're going to want to sell Girl Scout cookies to each other and stuff like that. But by and large, that I think we are going to need ordinances that enforce that, because the residents generally don't want it at the moment when that new subdivision is being built. That's my comment.
Well, might help us, Brandon, in becoming One North Ogden. We surely want to diminish this us against them.
Agreed.
And an ordinance might be a good way to do that. So
agreed. But if you can imagine some development coming next to you that you didn't possibly agree with, based on the density or the mixed use or something like that, you may not want that connectivity. And I agree that it's necessary.
well, and obviously developers are a little bit hesitant because they lose a lot, right? With having a street stub road go out. So it's an issue I think that's important to be considered. I agree, Brandon. Okay, Rob, any other questions from those who are participating with us?
Okay, we
Okay,
can
Rob, you want to finish up?
move on to the commercial zone next. So the next item is under the commercial zones, and today we actually have 4 commercial zones: C1, C2, CP1, CP2. In my estimation, we really don't need 4 zones. At the most, we probably need 2 commercial zones in my thought process. One is to have some sort of a convenience or neighborhood commercial zone. And then we should be doing something about our commercial along Washington Boulevard, because it's truly a unique circumstance there and along the frontage along 2600, 2700 as well. So the suggestion there is to take a look at coming up with some sort of a mixed use zone. In addition to on Washington Boulevard, we also have manufacturing zoning, and we also have our R4 zone. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of use designations that go along there, whereas our general plan talks about having a more cohesive development scheme along Washington Boulevard. So one of the thoughts is to come up with a zoning designation. I've thrown out the term CBD zone, a central business district zone. For some reason, people didn't latch onto that one, which I don't care about the name. But the idea is to have some sort of an overall designation that really gets at the type of development activity that we want to see, along with the appropriate standards for Washington Boulevard. And there in the general plan, it also talks about the difference between our downtown and our southtown area. The example of that is that in Ogden City, when I was there many years ago, they created a CBD zone, and they actually ended up identifying subcategories of the zoning. So they had a more intensive zone, and then they had a less intensive zone, and they actually have a designation of different uses relative to that. So I know that we've initiated a discussion of the General Plan Steering Committee to talk a little bit more about that. And I reached out to the planning director for Ogden, Greg Montgomery, who's going to be making an overview to that group relative to that potential type of direction for our city.
I'd like to see that, Rob. I think we are getting a hodgepodge in our business district, and it's time that we do look at that, whether it's CBD. That's that cannabis oil stuff that's coming out, Rob. We might have to come up with a different name, but in substance, I think that you're right on.
Okay, any other thoughts on that one? The last one I've listed is update environmental standards in a sensitive lands overlay zone. This is a project that I've taken on that this past year we ended up adopting some new grading and drainage standards for the city. And this is the companion ordinance that identifies the relationship to the overall design for making sure that steep slopes and areas that have geologic hazard areas or hydrologic problems, those kinds of things are identified and accounted for. The city was very on the cutting edge. Clear back in 1997, if you go to our website, there's the North Hillside Development Study that actually was a fairly detailed study identifying those geologic hazards. So what I've been working on is with our city engineer and other planning staff is coming up with a sensitive lands overlay zone that we will incorporate as part of. We may actually move this forward ahead of the overall discussion, but I wanted you to be aware that we're not going to leave that one behind. That's something that I feel very strongly about for the city. We don't want to be like North Salt Lake. Any thoughts about that? So the last thing that I've done is I've just kind of given you an add-on list. So again, we don't have sufficient funds to have the consultants do that list of projects, either the cluster subdivision, signed chapter, TDR, PRUD, sensitive lands, and parking. So as we get a little bit further along here, we're going to be coming back with a recommendation on which of those is the highest priority given our funding. And again, I've included the list of what staff is feeling that we have the ability to move on as well.
Okay,
I know I've
you.
given you this is a boatload of stuff here tonight.
It is a lot to consider, and look forward to seeing where this results, and know that we're here to give input. And I think the Planning Commission can also give substantial input on this. So let's continue along as outlined. Any further questions or comments? If not, let's move on to our next item, which is the discussion on amending the accessory building standards. Rob, do you want to continue on with that?
Thanks, Mayor.
Mayor, if I can interrupt, it looked like Meg Sanders had her hand up in the chat.
John, are you monitoring that?
Yes. Do you want to let everyone? We can let her chat if you want to.
Yeah, as Brandon said, it's kind of an informal work session, so let's do that so we don't miss Meg's comments.
Interestingly enough, I don't see that in the chat. I've been trying to watch that as well.
So it's in the, if you go to participants, it'll pop up a screen of panelists versus attendees, and you can see people raise their hand.
Okay.
Yeah, does Nicole have her hand raised also? Am I seeing that correctly?
It is raised. I don't know if she still has a.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I'm not sure why it's raised. I must have hit something. Sorry.
But Meg is with us.
Okay, is she live or by chat?
Live. She's out in front of her house.
Okay, Meg.
It doesn't look like she has a microphone next to her name though. So she might need to actually call in. I don't know if you can hear me, Meg, but if you can call, there's like a phone number you can call in. That's how John is connecting. John, can you help her get connected?
Well, so if you're not muted, then you wouldn't see a microphone. So Meg, will you try talking and see if we can hear you?
I see everybody that has a microphone, it's either gray, which means it's live, or it's red with a slash through it, which means that they're muted. And she doesn't have one by her name. Neither do you, John. So you don't have a microphone by your name either.
Yeah, because you're right, because I am called in. It did say, let's see. Meg, is there, if you're clicking on the bottom left of your screen, is there an option to connect to using your phone's audio? So you might tap it and it'll pop up options.
In the chat, Meg is saying, I wanted to discuss what less discretion.
I'm assuming that's the overall project, Rob, where you mentioned that we wanted ordinances so there would be less discretion and more compliance. I can't confirm that with Meg, but
So according to state law, administrative decisions, it's pretty specific that cities need to come up with standards so that applicants know what they have to comply with in order to get an approval. That's the sum and substance of it. John, would you add anything to that?
No, I believe that's, yeah, it basically says if you can't articulate the rule or the standard in the ordinance, you can't enforce it.
John, if you look at the chat, Meg also has a couple other questions there that I think would be addressed. Can you see her?
Yeah, you want me to just read it out?
Why don't you read those so they can be addressed?
Okay, so what it says is I wanted to discuss what less discretion means. Mr. Scott said there would be less discretion, and I wondered what that meant in regards to zoning as well as a legislative body like the council. Second one would be about how to control cluster subdivision developments. And then she says she's going to try and reconnect. Oh, she does have a muted microphone now, Meg. Let me try and unmute you and see. Yep, I think we can hear you
I'm
now,
back.
Meg.
I'm back. I'm sorry. The TV behind me was full blast, so I had to go outside so I could have a moment's peace. But that is exactly what I wondered. When Rob said that there would be less discretion, I didn't understand if that was pertaining to zoning. He said that if those that had wanted to build or have a rezone, if they met the requirements, that you would then have to acquiesce to that. And I just wondered, well, what would be the point of the city council, since a huge part of your job is rezoning? And I didn't know if I misunderstood that. And then the second thing is cluster subdivision sounds really scary to me. It sounds like packing them in. I mean, my neighbor's right there. I mean, I can, see them right there. So how would you make sure that you actually had preserved space and that a developer wouldn't continue to build more? Okay. You can mute me now because my husband's coming and he's going to probably say something stupid right when he walks back up. So.
Thanks, Meg.
So she's mentioned two different things. The first one is the role of the city council. The city council is a legislative body, and the city council has much more discretion with respect to your decision-making processes. Again, the things that you're involved with relate to policy. So it's, in terms of land use, it's the general plan. It's establishing standards within the codes. And it's also the, when should a map amendment take place? So when somebody goes and makes a request for a rezone from one zone to another, the city council has lots of discretion. So what we try to do is, when we have these policy matters come before the council and the planning commission, when they make those recommendations, we use our general plan for guidance, to help us make those decisions, but they're not cut and dried when it comes to legislative matters. So that's, I hope that one helps you out with respect to that. In terms of cluster subdivisions, it's like any other subdivision. It has to meet specific standards in order to be approved. So there would be some specific, like I say, we don't have one in place. So it would be crafting an ordinance in such a manner that it would make sense for the city to be able to address specific needs while at the same time allowing for someone to reasonably be able to do something with their land.
2 points to that.
And Rob,
Sorry.
I would just add to that. I would add to that that typically on a cluster subdivision, the remaining land is deed restricted with a conservation easement of some sort held by a third party.
Well, and my thoughts on that, and I don't necessarily think we need to get too into the specifics of clustered subdivisions, right? Because that's not an agenda item. It's more like the philosophy of it. But I would think, one, the overall density doesn't increase, right? So if this land was plotted as, you know, to be somewhere near a half acre, you know, well, maybe in our R112 zone, but the overall density of that subdivision doesn't increase. It just clusters the density together, preserving the open space, right? That would be one principle. The second thing is it's one of those things that I feel would almost need a site plan review for each development and or a development agreement with the city, just because of the complexities of it. And like what Commissioner Councilman Swanson was talking about with, you know, if they're really trying to pull a fast one by developing the prime land and leaving the steep or the, you know, something in an old ditch as undeveloped, you know, I think it would need careful review of each development.
Meg, does that answer your question?
She's nodding yes. Good. So Mayor will be working with the consultants and we'll make sure that we keep both the Planning Commission and the council not only informed, but as we come to critical decision points, we're not going to wait till the ordinance is crafted. We'll be coming to you periodically with those touch points that make sure that we're on the right track.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. Are there any other questions from those participating with us this evening? If not, let's go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, which is a discussion on amending the accessory building standards.
Am I on, Mayor?
Yes, you are, Rob.
Okay, John, if we could go to the staff report for this item. So by way of background in that, the Planning Commission went through a fairly extensive process again in response to a neighborhood that had some serious issues with a very large accessory building. And as a result of that, staff has been working with the Planning Commission to come up with some standards that would reinforce the relationship between neighbors. And as such, that's what the amendment is that's before the council for their final consideration. So city planning commissioners, the council had a couple questions before they decided to make a final decision on this. It seemed to be that there was, it boiled down to two issues. There was a property, it's up on the, it's about 800 east and what, John, 3100 north, something like that.
2850, Rob.
2850 north. And that parcel is an R18 AG zone. And it's a fairly large parcel. It's like 3.5, 4 acres, something like that. They're interested in not having the proposed R18 AG accessory building standards apply to their property since it's so large. as we've looked at that as a planning staff, our recommendation there is that it would be appropriate to take it's a sufficient size that an RE20 zone would be appropriate to consider for that particular property. So our recommendation would be that the property owner make application for a rezone, and they should be able to, they've got plenty of room to be able to accommodate the type of accessory building that they're interested in. Any questions about that one?
Rob, one of the concerns that the Carneys had was that even in the RE20, there's a maximum 2,000 square foot allowable for a accessory building. And the one that they want to build is about 2,400 square feet. So that was the other question that they had. Do we put 12 houses on that? You know, they subdivide it, put 12 houses on, or do we find a way to have a single home at about 5,000 square feet and a large toy barn is essentially what it is instead of all the other houses.
Bill, I like you kind of ran an idea up the flagpole about having a certain percentage based upon land size instead of setting specific square footage on larger portions of land. Have you given that much more thought?
I have. Thank you, Mayor. One of the thoughts that I had that Mayor's referring to is if you have an RE20 and you have an acre, you can build a 2,000 square foot as long as you're meeting the open ground percentages. You could have a 2,000 square foot. If you have 2 acres, if you have 10 acres, you're still limited to that 2,000 square foot. I'd like to see if we can come up with some kind of a sliding scale so that the larger the piece of land is, the larger the footprint. Obviously, we don't want a 20,000 square foot barn out somewhere, but you know, a 2,500 or a 3,000 square foot maximum if somebody's on 10 acres. Something along those lines, I think, would be a little more equitable for folks like the Carneys who have bought up 3.5 acres that was ostensibly slated to be developed under the R18, and they're going to put a single home and a garage on it. So something to think about.
So we can take a look at that one. The provision that's in the code says maximum size on lots or parcels less than 1 acre or adjacent to an R1 zone. So I think that there's, you know, definitely some wiggle room there. The other option to that is they can build more than one large accessory building. We don't require, we don't have a limitation like we have in the R1 zones to only allow one large accessory building. So they could potentially build 2.
Rob, I think what I'd like to see is us come up with some compromise that can be used in our ordinance instead of maybe addressing this one particular issue. And I really like Phil's idea, if we can get proper setbacks, etc., with maybe a maximum. But, you know, as you think about what Phil has said, it is kind of interesting that even if you have 10 acres, you're limited to 2,000 square feet. So
yes, I see what you're saying, and we can put our thinking caps together on that one. Figure it out.
Well, I mean, on the flip side of that, and I just had this I haven't been anywhere in like a month, but I went to a pharmacy today, and the pharmacist and his assistant both grabbed me, and they were wanted to talk about large buildings because they knew I was on the planning commission. And so I would just suggest that, you know, this could be an avenue where a developer puts his large building in and then goes and, because he has the 5 acres to do that, and then goes and turns around and develops the remaining 2.5 acres and slides his large building in, as well as it gets the rest of the development.
yeah, I think we can prevent that with some language in the ordinance that it has to be accompanied with a residential home and on the initial plan that was presented. So I think we can, it's a good point, but I think we can build language in that would protect against that.
but I don't know how you'd ever enforce him from down the road subdividing land that he owns.
We'll take a look at it. We'll see if we can't come up with some appropriate language for you.
Okay.
So this, if you move, John, the staff report down just a little bit to page 2. Unfortunately, can we see that entire table in the view there? Just go up a little bit further so we can see the bottom half of the table. Whoops. There we go. So one of the other discussions that commissioners is that the city council had some concerns about some of the standards for accessory buildings. So one of the things that we did is that we actually made some sense out of the way that the previous ordinance is structured. So we have design and materials in one section, excuse me. And the other one relates to the location and size. So the primary concern of the council was this particular section, and I've given you a table to show the difference between the two. Again, there's a difference between RE20 zones and R1 and RCC zones. So I've tried to show that. So that metal buildings under 200 square feet, those are the typical buildings that you see at Lowe's or Home Depot or Ace or wherever. Those are allowed in both zones. And anything under 200 square feet does not require a building permit. They should get a land use permit just in terms of location. So buildings in the RE20 zone, metal prefab buildings and those with architectural metal over 200 square feet are allowed. So it's a recognition that those particular properties, sorry, I'm going to take a drink of water here. Those properties are different in scale and the relationship to the projects and properties that they're on. In the R1 zone and the RCC zone, buildings over 200 square feet, there's some standards there, an attempt to be sensitive to surrounding properties. So what's been included in the ordinance is constructive of some horizontal siding, either stucco, wood, or similar material as the main building. So that's one standard. And then under number 3, there's a list of standards that are there. Those have been limited. We've changed that instead of exterior wall treatment to simply be a similar color. And we've been very flexible when it comes to similar. I can tell you that. Then there's a standard on roofing materials. We allow metal roofs and they should have a similar color as the main building. Recognize it's not going to be exact. The next standard is that the Planning Commission felt that in order to give some character to the building, that it would be appropriate to have an eave on those buildings that would be a minimum of 12 inches. And again, aluminum fascia and soffits would be allowed. And then the next one is accessory buildings fronting onto a street must have a window that occupy 5% of the facade of the building, or have a person door or a garage door with windows. Any one of those would satisfy that requirement. So I've come up with some options for you to consider along for those particular standards. The first one would be applied to both RE20 and R1 and RCC zones. Should standards apply? The second one is apply only to R1 and RCC zones. The third one, identify which subsections A, B, or C should apply to which zones. Number 4, all accessory buildings shall have a buffer of either a fence or landscaping or a combination of the two. And lastly, that there should be a roof pitch of 412. So those are the items that the Planning Commission felt would be appropriate to require of only R1 and RCC zones. So let me throw it open to discussion between the Planning Commission and the council as to which of any of those things you want to retain, or if you want to have a further discussion on that. That's the idea for this item.
Council, any comments, questions, or from the public?
Rob, Phil here. Just wondering, help me understand the thinking behind in 3A. Sorry, not 3, never mind. I answered my own question. Oh, my goodness sakes. Never mind.
While you're thinking about this, I can just let you know that the Planning Commission had very lengthy discussions about every one of these items. So you've got several commissioners that are online with you. So commissioners, if you have some thoughts about that you'd like to share with the council on those standards, then please feel free to chime in.
No comments? How about from the public? I think what we're trying to reach here is a happy medium where we can not be overbearing on people's property, but that we can be reasonable with surrounding citizens. I think there's some good compromises in here.
You've hit the nail on the head, Mayor.
Any comments? Obviously, we'll be taking this ordinance up at a future council meeting, but tonight's purpose is to have any discussion from council or from the public. I know there's been some concerns from the public that have been expressed previously. Hopefully those have been resolved. If not, now would be the time to speak up so we can make the necessary adjustments. There being no comments, then we would ask for a motion or any further discussion to adjourn the work session and move into an active city council meeting.
Mayor, could I just make one last comment, please?
Yes.
What I'll do is as a staff, we'll go back and take a look at the RE20 situation and come up with some options there, and before we bring this back for your consideration.
Yeah, I'd really like you to think hard about Councilman Swanson's suggestion. I think that has a lot of merit to it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. Rob, thanks for your great presentations tonight and your work on this. Very much appreciated. So with that, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn the work session and move into a active city council meeting. We have a motion.
I move that we adjourn the work session and move into the active city council meeting.
We have a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you very much. With that, we'll now move into our active agenda, item number 7, which is a discussion or an action to consider a resolution amending the city council rules of procedure. Hopefully you've had a chance to read that. John Call, our city manager, will be the presenter.
So council, the next two items are basically intertwined. That's why there was only one staff report. When Governor Herbert did his executive order that allowed for this type of a meeting to happen without an anchor location, it they did request that every city adopt an ordinance that would also allow this to happen as well at the same time. So this is that resolution. The first one is dealing with the actual city council rules and procedures, because we have in our ordinance some language that specifically says that we allow for electronic meetings, but we're required to not have more than 2 members of the council participate in the electronic meeting. So this resolution makes an exception, which is shown here on your screen in red. It says that that's the standard rule that we typically have, except during times of emergency or health crisis. And so basically, the next 2 times that it swaps that language around, it's intended to specifically say that in times of emergency or health crisis, we can operate electronic meetings like the one we're having today. Then we did also add another provision at the very end of that meeting or electronic meeting section that basically says the mayor has the ability on how to conduct the meeting in the way that best complies with the Open Meeting Act, including some modifications to the rules. And that's intended to be kind of a catch-all. A good example might be that we might be doing a electronic meeting, and there might be something that prevents us from being able to be on a video chat. And so it might be done through a phone conferencing or something like that. But it just allows for the council a little bit of flexibility. It is up to the mayor on what that flexibility is, but it would only be timed during that emergency health crisis type situation. Any questions about those tweaks to the rules or procedures?
John, that would be any type of crisis, even other than the health, if there's an earthquake or some other type of crisis. Just want to clarify that.
Yeah, so that, go ahead.
That's what it says, I think, in the resolution, but I just wanted to clarify that it's basically in any type of crisis to be determined by the mayor, if I read that.
Right, and it specifically is not quote unquote an emergency meeting, because further up in this ordinance it defines what emergency meeting means, and so that's a little bit different situation than an actual emergency.
Yeah, this is how we would meet in the event of a crisis. It's not an emergency meeting. It's under certain circumstances on how we would meet. So that is a good clarification, John.
Okay.
Anything else, John?
No, it was meant to be a minor tweak to just bring us into compliance with the governor's order.
All right, so is there any further discussion on this? Any questions or discussion by the council?
Do we have a resolution number?
Yes, 09-2020. So we'll be looking for a motion to adopt this resolution 09-2020.
And Mayor, I'll make the motion. We adopt resolution 09-2020 as presented by John.
We have a motion by Councilman Barker. We're looking for a second.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We will now do a roll call vote on that. Councilwoman Stoker.
Sure, you need to unmute yourself.
While we're waiting for her to unmute, we'll go to Councilwoman
Okay,
Ekstrom.
I'm unmuted.
Okay, Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilwoman Ekstrom,
Yes.
Councilman Severing,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous in the affirmative. John, do you want to move to item 8, which would be a discussion and or action to consider a resolution adopting the electronic meeting policy?
Yes. So this is a resolution that we borrowed from, I can't remember the city now, but it was circulated through the City Managers Association. And what we did do some tweaks, but essentially what this ordinance does is it outlines the basic rules for any electronic meeting like the one we're having, including quorum verification, making sure there's enough council members there participating, how you can include the public, and include some language about emergency and those kind of crisis times when the mayor has the ability, and then basically says that the meetings will basically act as if you're in a physical location together, but will be tweaked based on what works best. And then even provide some information on if there was a disconnected number of council members such that you lost a quorum, and how that would be handled. It's basically just, I think I scrolled down a little fast, but if this is the governor's actual executive order, intended to basically allow the meeting we're having tonight to happen. This sort of a thing. It's kind of an interesting read. It's probably the first time that sort of a thing has happened in Utah in quite a while, where there's actually been a executive override of legislative code. But I think that it's a legitimate reason, and I think that you'd actually we'll see some tweaks to the Open Meeting Act to allow for this sort of thing, so that there isn't an executive order required next time. But do you have any questions about the actual ordinance or the actual resolution for the city?
Council, hopefully all of you had a chance to read through that. Any questions or further discussion of John? If not, we'd be looking for a motion to pass this as ordinance 10/2020. Looking for a motion.
Well,
Move it.
if I asked a question, I was just wondering, is this, the language in this is very specific to COVID-19. So I'm assuming once this is lifted, and is it lifted by the governor that would make this then no longer applicable in our city code as well? Or is this something that just sort of remains on the books for maybe the next kind of COVID-19 type crisis, just in case? What's the duration?
So the actual executive order that's here on the screen right now that I'm highlighting, it does mention the COVID-19 issue, and this is what came from Governor Herbert. So this is just a copy of what he put together. It's not the official document, but our resolution doesn't mention anything about a specific example like COVID-19. What it does is just mentions that, and it's this red language in red that's on your screen. It says when you have that emergency health crisis, the mayor has the authority on how to conduct these meetings in the way that complies the best with the Open Meeting Act. And so our ordinance doesn't focus on particular disease or situation. It just kind of says, but it is piggybacked on top of the governor's order, so that and we include it in the packet so you could see what the governor had said.
Okay, so it's just, that's the reason why we are amending the one that we have already. Okay, perfect. That clarifies that. Thank you, John.
Yes.
So
John,
I would move.
Just one other question. John, that refers to a health crisis. Should that be more general to conform with our previous one and identified emergencies?
So yeah, what this one, I tried to copy the same language down. So it says, in the event of an emergency, health crisis, or threat, the mayor has the authority to make a decision on how to conduct the meeting to comply the best way with the Utah Open Meetings Act rules, procedures, including modifications. So it's kind of intended to be that catch-all language as well.
Okay, with that, council will be looking for a motion to adopt resolution 10-20.
I would move that we accept resolution 10-20, adopting the electronic meetings policy.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Severing. Do we have a second?
Second,
Who was that the second, so we can identify that?
Councilwoman Stoker.
Councilwoman Stoker, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we will have a roll call vote. Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Severing,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
and Councilwoman Ekstrom.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes in the affirmative by unanimous vote. We'll now move to item 10, which are public comments, or do we have any comments from those who have joined us?
Mayor, did you miss number 9?
Yeah, I'm just trying to be consistent and messing up every meeting. Thank you. John, do you want to move on item number 9, which is an action to consider appointing the city treasurer as the city treasurer and HR director? Thank you, Cheryl.
So, council, this is essentially an action that's exactly what it sounds like. We've been trying to look at how the city's run and look at ways we can make things more efficient and maybe lighten the load of some people who might have been overwhelmed a bit. One of those areas we found where there seemed to be a change that would make a positive impact on the city as well as the employees involved with the positions was to move the human resource director to include it with the treasurer role that's handled by Jamie Jones right now. Jamie has been with the city for a long time and has been doing the payroll and other things that oftentimes kind of cross into this human resource realm. And we thought that she was a natural fit for it. She's got the right certifications with I can't think of the organization now, the Human Resource Group.
It's SHRM.
SHRM. Thanks, Mayor. And she's got a good skill. And one additional benefit that we have with her position is she doesn't have any direct employees. And so this means that in addition to the mayor and myself, and there's an opportunity for any employee to be able to go and talk to the HR director, regardless of if they're their employee or not. And I don't say that because there was an issue with the previous one. I say that because it just makes it easier on all employees that it's clear who they can go to if there's an issue, and they don't have to question about, what their resources are. Already, Jamie has been doing some great things in that department and really helping taking a load off of Annette's plate. And so right now we're looking for, because the human resource director is a department head position, even though Jamie is technically already an appointed position as the treasurer, we felt it appropriate to ask the council to confirm that appointment as recommended by the mayor.
John, let me just also comment. Had a chance to meet with Jamie. She's very excited. I believe she's very qualified. John and Annette and myself have met with her, so it surely has my full recommendation to the council. Is there any further discussion or comments regarding this discussion?
I would just say that I think I would compliment this decision. I think Jamie will do an excellent job.
Thank you, Councilman Severing. Any other comments or discussion?
Yes, I think Jamie is fantastic. She'll do really good things. I'm assuming that with these added responsibilities that a salary increase comes along with it too. So I'm hoping that she's compensated for her work.
Yes, Councilwoman Ekstrom, we have made that appropriate adjustment already. So thank you for bringing that up. Any further discussion? Comments from the council? If not, I'd be looking for a motion to appoint the city treasurer as the city treasurer and HR director.
Mayor, I'd move that we appoint the city treasurer as Jamie, I can't remember her last name, also to perform as the human resources director.
A motion by Councilman Swanson. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Second by Councilman Severing. Any further discussion? Not, we'll go to a roll call vote. Councilwoman Ekstrom,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Severing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to item 10, public comments, either by chat or joining video. We'll wait for a few minutes to see what comments we have.
Mayor Julie Anderson has her hand up.
Okay, well, let's let her address us. Julie,
Okay.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
we can.
Yes.
Great, thank you. I had a question for you guys. I have a concern. We're seeing a great number of trucks going up and down 2600 North, huge trucks hauling full loads of dirt. And I have some concerns about the damage that it's doing on that particular road. We kind of watching that to make sure that, you know, we're staying on top of it. They have done some work down there by the old barn. And that has been left, you know, it's got a plate over it, but the plate isn't on very good. And so I have some concerns because these trucks are going up and down, most probably frequently every 15, 20 minutes. And they're loaded both ways, up and down. So I just kind of wanted to bring that to your attention. I'm sorry I didn't start it right either. Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I apologize. Kind of a new system for us. But that was kind of my big concern that I had, is the amount of trucks that are going up and down right now that are fully loaded. And I'm talking fully loaded. Thank you.
Julie, do you have a suggestion on how to resolve that based upon the two developments that are taking place? Do you have any
I
suggestions?
really don't. I'm sorry, Mayor. I really don't. The only thing I can think of is that, you know, we just make sure that we watch the road. And so if we see any, you know, maybe as the city workers drive up and down that know that road better than I do, if they see any concerns or any worries, because there are those two subdivisions going in and there's not much you know, but it is worrisome. I mean, because that's the only way in and out. And so I just do have a real concern of the damage that's being done. So I don't know if it's just a case of being mindful, and maybe even the citizens, if they start seeing, you know, potholes occurring or other issues, maybe to report it to the Public Works on their Facebook or, you know, by phone.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Any comments you have, Julie? Bless you, Blake.
Excuse me, thank you.
That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, for your comments.
Thanks, Julie.
John, do we have any other comments from the public?
We do. Meg Sanders has her hand up. So we're going to try the same thing and promote her to a panelist and unmute her. Yep, you're there, Meg.
Hey,
Okay,
Meg.
sorry. You know, I'm not prone to heartfelt messages, but I really wanted to thank all of you for being there today and having this discussion and giving a sense of normalcy to a very strange and awkward situation. You know, not being able to come down there and judge all of your comments and your facial expressions, and instead getting just to have that hour of normalcy that I have in my life. So thank you so much. Thank you for being brave and letting us into your homes and I just really appreciate it. And you know, I'm not prone to heartfelt moments, but I am grateful that you gave the city this, that you let us into your home and your thought process. And I have to say, it really did make me happy. I saw John working on his yard and met his wife, and I got to see Phil, and my son saw Phil playing with his dogs and said, "Nice set of twin dogs you got there." And I literally had to go home and write that down in my journal because it killed me that he yelled to Phil Swanson, "Nice set of twin dogs you got there." I mean, and of course Phil was like, "Thank you." And anyway, it just, thank you again. Thank you. Please everyone stay healthy, stay safe.
Thanks, Meg. That's very kind of you. And know that we're always going to do our best to try to be transparent with the citizens.
I know you will, Neil.
Well,
I know.
thank you. That was very kind. And, you know, it's an interesting time, isn't it? There's a lot of fear in our community, and but there's an opportunity, I think, for us too, to look around us. And there's a lot of people out there that that just a smile and a brief conversation means a lot to. So thank you so much for your comments. Although you didn't state your address.
I have to stay secret in my secret bat cave.
Okay.
2915 North, 875 East in North Ogden.
Thank you, Meg, very much. That was very kind. John, do we have any other comments from the public that you can see?
No, not that I can see. It might be helpful, Mayor, if some people would just let us know how they felt about this software. We had a little bit of an issue starting with because our internet went down at 5:45 and it took a little while for everything to come back. But it'd be good to know, even if they just typed it into the chat, if there was things they thought that maybe we can improve on at our meeting next Tuesday.
That's a good point, John. And let me just say thank you for your efforts. You've been good. We've been using this on Tuesday mornings with our staff meeting with the city. And John has been really on top of this. I think obviously we'll learn a lot of things. We learned some things from the Planning Commission meeting the other night, but that's a good idea. Moving on to council, mayor and staff comments. Council, can you give John some feedback?
I have been on calls and this has gone really well. Thank you, John. It takes a little doing to actually get all of this set up so that everybody can do it. And then moderating also, thank you for that, watching with the chat, making it as much as interactive as we possibly can. And I definitely prefer seeing you all in person, but this is the next best thing right now. Thank you.
John, I don't know if you've seen this, but from Susan Clements, she said the meeting went well, and she has a suggestion about posting the agenda on Facebook as well as on the website. We do have a comment from Jay Dowpaz. He said Zoom works fine. From Stephanie Casey, worked great for her, and she expressed her thank you. And then we do have a comment from Councilman Swanson, thanking all those who participated. And then another one from Julie Anderson, stating I've used Zoom before and I like this software. I think it would be nice to see the citizens if they want to be seen. Your faces I have seen in 9 days as I've been quarantined because of being very sick. And Julie, we hope, we were unaware of that, but we hope you're feeling better. And hopefully it wasn't the COVID-19 virus, but please know that we'll be thinking about you and hope you have a fast recovery. Susan also said, I like sitting in my comfortable chair at home. Your chairs are not as comfortable. And she wanted to know if Phil's wearing his pajamas. Actually, I added that, Phil, so.
Well, I'm reading her chat, and no, Mayor, I'm not in my pajamas, but I am shoeless and in shorts.
Okay, bless you. And then Evan said, please let the public know we will be having an important discussion on the budget next Tuesday night. And that is very important. There's some significant issues that we're dealing with in the city. And Susan, I did say that that was my idea, that you didn't really say that. So I got that. And Julie indicated that they wouldn't test her for it, but she says her breathing is labored. And so be safe and let us know what we can do, Julie, to help. We're a community that cares about our citizens and want to do all we can to help. So may you get feeling better quickly. Any other comments from staff or from the council?
Mayor,
Yes, Councilwoman Stoker.
I'm not exactly sure what happened to my face, but I'm not on it. And since I'm so tech savvy, I don't know how to get back.
I can see you and you look as great as ever. Something happened to mine too, and that's why I kind of lost track of the agenda. All of a sudden, all I had was my big face on the screen. I thought I might be scaring everybody.
Nope. Anyway, I thought this went well for the first time, and appreciate those who have chatted in and their comments. And Julie, please take care of yourself. And may I thank you for your kind words. And everybody in the city, stay safe and well. And especially our responders, as I can see Ryan, first responders, and our police force.
I mentioned to Ryan earlier today, we had a medical emergency just kitty corner across the street from me, and it was really unique to see the first responders in their gear. And I think it brought home what we're really dealing with and facing here. And unfortunately, apparently my neighbor passed away. So it was timely that the first responders got there, but it was really first time I'd seen them in their protective equipment. So thanks to our first responders for sure. Ryan, would you pass that on, please?
Yep, will do for sure.
Mayor,
Yes, sir, Councilman Swanson.
I just want to echo the comments that have been said. A shout out to our first responders, police and fire. They're encountering quite a bit in addition to what they normally encounter on a daily basis. And I think we're all grateful for the risks that they're willing to take on our behalf.
Yes, thank you, Councilman Swanson. I did have a conversation, it might have been a staff meeting this morning, where the chief brought this up, as we are experiencing an unusually high situation with attempted suicides and completed suicides. And so let's encourage all of our neighbors to be aware of what's around them and offer that support and smile or call or text or whatever it may be. These are very unusual times where we're kind of quarantined in our own homes and we miss that social interface. So please just be aware of those around you, and whether it's a call or a text or an email or whatever it may be, I think we as leaders in the city should lead out in that. So please consider that as you go about your daily activities. Staff, any comments from you or any further comments from council? Annette, we haven't heard much from you. I assume you're with us. Along with John, I've had the chance to check in with the majority of our department heads and their families, and just want to report that they're all doing well. And they're staying in close contact with their team members, with encouragement from John. We care deeply about all of our city employees. And so, John, thank you again for your encouragement there. John, any comments from you?
What I would add, Mayor, is we could the department heads in particular with this budget coming, they would probably really support a chance to talk with each of you, or at least with their department liaison, sometime before next Tuesday, to better understand the questions you might have and find out where you might provide some direction. It'll be an interesting budget year, but the department heads have been putting a lot of time into it, and Evan especially, on making sure that we're ready to have the discussions and be ready to present a tentative budget towards the beginning of May when we're statutorily required to. So that would help. And then also, you've been included on some emails to the whole city that as employees. Don't hesitate if you have anything you'd like to share, especially in this time, to just help us all feel connected. Obviously don't shoot an email out every hour, but if you got something you want to share it with everyone. I sent an email out about just what was going on in my little basement office. And it, just to help us stay connected and have kind of that outlet and that laugh if we can, or even sometimes a little cry if we need to. So other than that, thanks for all you're doing.
Hey, John, I'm still up for an online game. If you want to get up a Zoom meeting and you can move all the pieces on a board game, I'm down.
Hey, I like it.
All right. Any other comments before we adjourn?
Just a big thanks. It was a great meeting.
Thanks, Blake, and thanks to the staff. They're doing their jobs every day, and just a reminder, as leaders in the city, let's stay home, let's be safe, and follow the governor's recommendations. I think the example we can set will be helpful, but get outside every day and get a little sunshine. With that, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Councilwoman Stoker, second.
Second.
Anybody oppose adjourning, speak now or forever hold your peace. We're adjourned. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.